Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids, where we teach little kids to talk and help parents understand their little kids. And today I'm talking to Regina DeMeo, who is a family law attorney. Regina, thanks for being here.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Will you tell us a little bit more about sort of your work? What is a family law attorney, and why might we need one?
Well, a family law attorney, I've been doing it for 22 years in Maryland and DC, and typically we help people on the front end. So it could be a couple that's about to get married and they just want to have a very simple prenup done that just says, here's what we agree is going to be joint and marital. Here's what we agree is going to be separate. And sometimes they want to put in a provision about alimony so that no one's worried about indefinite alimony in the event things don't work out, right? So it's a really happy, easy moment because usually everybody's on the same page. I love doing them. And I feel like these people are really doing the hard work up front, right? Like defining what's going to be their joint endeavor. As opposed to on the back end where a family law attorney gets involved and is trying to restructure a family, at which point we're dividing the assets, helping people determine the amount of support that needs to be paid, and how they're going to share time with their children, which is obviously the most important thing.
Getting divorced or separating is a very, very touchy business. So there are so many questions that come to mind, but what resources do you have in place, or how do you handle adults who might be not able to be in the same room with each other? And as somebody who dislikes conflict intensely, this is very stressful to me in particular.
Right, we have to screen our cases carefully, right? So if I don't think that they're going to be able to sit in the same room, that's not a good case for mediation. That's a perfect case for where we would do a more traditional approach. Each client retains their own attorney, and the attorneys do all of the negotiations and the back and forth.
And so that's not you.
I do that.
You do that, okay.
Yes. I mean, the first 10 years of my career, that's pretty much all I did. But then I switched gears and got trained as a collaborative attorney and mediator. So that to me has been more of a sweet opportunity, because those are clients that are able to sit at a table together and do want to work things out without going to court. So much less stressful.
Okay, so when we do a collaborative separation or whatever, what do you call it actually?
The collaborative divorce process.
Collaborative divorce process. What's the, how do I want to say this? Are both parties calling you? Is one party calling you and trying to get buy-in? How does that work?
Right, that's a great question. So we can only represent one person. So each client is retaining their own counsel, and then the four of us are going to sit down and sign an agreement to try and work things out and not go to court. So it's like mediation, but it's mediation on steroids. It's like mediation.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. Like mediation would be appropriate when you have two people that have pretty comparable levels of intelligence. And I don't just mean IQ, but I mean, they understand what's at stake and they're able to articulate and advocate for their own positions, right? And their options. Whereas if they don't feel like they have that kind of power, it's not going to be appropriate for mediation, but they could do the collaborative process and then rely on the attorneys to bring that level of intelligence of how we're going to navigate this process. And meanwhile, keep things confidential and out of court.
So many of my families, as you know, the people who watch this are families with young children, some of whom have special needs. Is that an area that you see as being, is that a part of your,
So unfortunately, I don't have the precise statistic, but I've seen a bunch that range and say anywhere between 80 and 90% of families with a special needs child are really at risk of going through a divorce, because you have that added stress, right? There's additional time that child's going to require, additional funds that child's going to require. And there's usually an imbalance in terms of who's doing more of the work, like getting the child to the therapist, getting the child, to the services that they need. And that can create a lot of resentment if people don't talk about it.
And there's also usually, if one person is doing all of that shuttling, then there's a financial disparity there too, oftentimes, right? It, yeah, there's so much that goes into, sort of finding out that you have a child with special needs and then getting through therapy and doing all of this work. But some of that is grieving the loss of what you thought you were going to have.
Right.
And I imagine that when families come to you, in the process of separating, they're also experiencing some amount of grief and loss.
It's more than just grief. I mean, there's genuine fear, right? So yes, there's the loss, like, no one gets married thinking they're going to get divorced and then, oh my gosh, I have to be alone. But it's like, am I going to find somebody else? Am I going to be okay? There's real fear involved. And so that's hard because, it's not my job or my training to deal with those emotions. That's really why it's appropriate for them to have a therapist or, parenting coach, divorce coach, whatever you want to call it, but like someone in the mental health profession who is going to help them really process all of those emotions.
And that's you, and you mentioned this before when we spoke, but that is not your skill set. That's not actually your preference. And you have very good people to whom you refer for auxiliary services in this case.
Right. I mean, I'd like to focus on the legal process. And I mean, I've been through a divorce myself, so I understand the emotions and I can certainly talk about them. But really, from a cost benefit perspective, also at my hourly rate, it doesn't make sense to have that kind of a session at like half the price. You could go and have a mental health professional who is actually trained in that field.
What are some things that, like, when people come to you, what are some things that you wish you could have told their younger selves?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of red flags that people avoid, right? Like, and there are things that we all really need to have more clarity on. Like, really, what are your deal breakers? We might kind of overlook that someone's spending a lot. It's like, oh, well, we're having so much fun, and you kind of ignore it until all of a sudden you're married, and then you see all these credit card bills piling up, right? You should have seen the red flag in the beginning and had that conversation about the importance of saving and not spending so much. Some people really don't talk about how their roles are going to change when they become parents. I mean, right? Like, I had a very, I think, egalitarian marriage up until the time that I had a child. And all of a sudden, it's like, why am I the one that has to come home every night and relieve the nanny? Why am I the one that's doing all the play dates? Right? And maybe we didn't talk about it enough, and a lot of resentment built up in that process.
Communication is so key, and it is true. When you meet somebody and you think, oh, I want to spend the rest of my life with somebody, you don't think to yourself, there are going to be nights when we're fighting about who has to make dinner.
Or emptying the dishwasher.
Or which way the toilet paper goes on the roll. Yeah. But
that's what I say. It's like, it's very rare that someone comes in, there's one incident that has caused them to come into my office. I call it death by 1,000 paper cuts. Right. That's what happens. It's like, it's a million different little slides that have all built up to the point where you one day wake up and are like, I can't do this anymore.
Have you ever sent people for more counseling and say, you don't need me yet?
Yeah. If I see that there's still love and that's not to the point where they really can't stand each other, I would so much prefer that they work out their issues.
Yeah, this is tricky. I mean, again, as somebody who's like really conflict averse, you have this job that puts you in the middle of conflict all the time. And I'm you can tell I'm like, oh. But thank goodness that these families find you. How do most of your clients find you?
A lot of times it's a referral from a former client or a colleague of mine that's like, okay, this is who you should talk to. And we all have our personalities that are pretty well known. Like, everybody knows I'm very much in favor of settling out of court, so that people coming to me are not the ones saying, oh, I want a shark, I want to go to court right away. That wouldn't be me. But yeah, I think sometimes I get court appointed mediation, Sometimes the court appoints me as a child's attorney in high conflict cases.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And in that case, what happens?
Those are really severe cases where the each parent has a completely different view of what should happen, and the court wants to bring in a neutral person that, and as an attorney, I can then advocate on behalf of the child. I can take depositions. I can do discovery. I'm in court and, cross-examining both parents.
Okay.
So it is fun for me because my client is the kid.
Yeah.
I love it, but those are really tough cases because, to get to the point where the court is appointing a child's attorney,
that's hard.
It's harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
My website is the best way to find out more about me, right? And then there's a ton of videos that I have on YouTube. My Twitter handle and YouTube and Facebook, it's Gen X Smarty. But yeah, you could just put in reginademeo.com. It'll have all my information up there.
Perfect. And I think at some point there's going to be a link, if there isn't already, to your YouTube channel on my YouTube channel. So you'll be able to find you there too, but it's reginademeo.com.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for coming. This was a treat. Take care.
You too. Bye.